Where's it? Oh, do you see it popping? Oh, do you see it popping?
In sheer numbers, the coronavirus outbreak is worse than it has ever been. Before this week, New York was the only state to ever report more than 5,000 new cases of coronavirus in a single day. But now, Texas, California, and Florida have all crossed that threshold on multiple days. And just today, Florida nearly doubled it, reporting almost 9,000 new cases. In total, we have set another single-day record in the U.S. for new cases, surpassing 40,000 for the first time. We have not seen these kinds of numbers since April, when, of course, the whole country was shut down. And for those weeks while we were shut down, night in and night out on this program, and all over the internet and in the media, epidemiologists and public health officials and local officials and journalists all said the same thing. The point of the shutdown was to buy time, to put into place the capacity so that we could open up safely. There have always been two doors available to us, two options, as I said before on the show. Door number one is an out-of-control outbreak that kills tens of thousands of people, sickens millions, and melts down the healthcare system. A once-in-a-century catastrophe. Door number two, also unappealing, brings us to an economic depression where we shut everything down to avoid complete health disaster. And we did that for weeks. The reason you do that is because you want to get to door number three. And many other countries have walked through door number three. It entails finding ways through contact tracing and testing, social distancing, and mask wearing to have some kind of normal life amidst the pandemic. The countries in that category that have succeeded, at least for now, they include South Korea and China, Taiwan and Hong Kong, Singapore and Vietnam, Australia and New Zealand, Germany and France, Italy and Spain and Greece and Belgium. Lots of countries have gone through door number three, but not us. We tried door number two. 40 million people lost their jobs. We bumped the curve, and then our leaders just gave up. Donald Trump gave up, just decided to pretend the virus went away. The federal government did not take the leadership role in beefing up the capacity necessary to deal with the virus. States said the CDC guidelines for reopening did not apply to them, and they were ready to reopen, and so they did. And so what is happening now is precisely what the health experts and the epidemiologists predicted, that the virus would come roaring back. Now, it did take a while, maybe longer than we thought. And in the interim, leading up to this point, there were a lot of preliminary victory laps.
I showed a green light today, and it's a green light to continue to go in the right direction. We are clearly on the other side of this pandemic.
The situation happening in New York is far different than what is happening in Texas and other places. For example, there will be, unfortunately, more people who pass away in one day in New York than we will have in Texas in the entirety of this whole pandemic situation.
You got a lot of people in your profession who waxed poetically for weeks and weeks about how Florida was going to be just like New York. Wait 2 weeks, Florida's going to be next. Just like Italy, wait 2 weeks. Well, hell, we're 8 weeks away from that, and it hasn't happened. So we've succeeded, and I think that people just don't want to recognize it because it challenges their narrative, it challenges their assumption.
Ah, yes. You idiots, you got it wrong. You said wait 2 weeks. We're 8 weeks. We won. We have succeeded, said Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on May 20th. Well, Mr. Governor, what exactly is success? Remember, the president urged all those governors to ignore his own CDC's guidelines. He told everyone, American citizens, young and old, that they should view themselves as warriors going out into the battlefield. And those governors went out and they listened to Trump. They dangerously stake themselves and their public reputation to optimism. And the cardinal lesson of this pandemic is that if you stake yourself to optimism, you will move too late and you will get eaten alive. We saw this in the last 4 months. We should not have to keep learning this lesson, but apparently have to once again. And so now we are in totally uncharted waters. And it's not because no other countries have had this challenge of a new outbreak. Many other countries locked down, reopened, and then had a new uptake, because that's the way the virus works. But having touched the hot stove once, they did not touch it again. And so those countries took dramatic proactive action. In South Korea, officials closed all the bars and nightclubs in Seoul after just 40 new cases were linked to a man who went clubbing one weekend. In Singapore, schools and most workplaces shut down again after seeing just 1,000 new cases in a week back in April. Early this month, Beijing also closed schools and urged people to work from home after confirming just over 100 new cases in a week. We had 40,000 cases in this country today. We have gone through much of this pandemic looking at other countries' curves and trying to compare where we are in relation to them. Well, this is what our curve looks like. Almost no other country has done this. Locked down, decreased cases, brought the virus under control, and then come out and hit a new record on the other side. And we have an enormous population under the leadership of a whole bunch of different states, all making these decisions, but something has to change. The one remaining solace, which the administration has been touting, is that fatalities are continuing to slowly decline. And they are, and thank God for that. But is there anyone out there who thinks that trend is going to continue to be the case if we keep seeing 40,000 new cases a day, or even 50,000, and if the hospitals keep filling up? What was supposed to happen was that we were buying time. If we went through door number 2, through tremendous sacrifice, the sacrifice of frontline workers and medical professionals and everyone who lost their job and every parent homeschooling their kid and every small business that was shuttered and everyone who just stayed home, through that sacrifice, we could buy time to put in place the governing capacity to make sure it would not happen again. We did none of that. We do not have the contact tracing capacity we need. We still do not have appropriate testing capacity. Look at this line for testing in Orlando, Florida today, before the testing site even opened. First car was waiting at 1 in the morning. That's how desperate people are for their health, to find out if they're sick. And drivers were advised to come with a full tank of gas and working air conditioning. The Washington Post reports that a drive-up testing site in Phoenix, Arizona, was swarmed on Saturday by about 1,000 people, leaving some baking in their cars for hours. And so now it is happening again, another outbreak. Today, Texas Governor Greg Abbott shut bars back down as of noon. He scaled back restaurant capacity to 50%. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis ordered all bars shut down in his state too, where, remember, they have almost 9,000 new cases today. California Governor Gavin Newsom told Imperial County in the southern part of the state they should reinstate their stay-at-home order. We had 3 options. We had door number 1 with the pandemic rating out of control, door number 2, a shutdown with economic destruction, and we could have gone through door number 3. We could have found our way to some form of normal life. But our leaders did not do what was necessary to get there, and so we are stuck, back with exactly the same horrible choice we had 14 weeks ago.
Between the spike in cases that we're seeing in states like Texas and Florida and the way those states handled their reopening, was it too much too soon?
In the case of each of these states, they reopened, in some cases, almost 2 months ago. And their test cases, their new cases from testing was low and steady. Their positivity rate was low.
And Pence was also asked about the Trump campaign's decision to resume indoor rallies in Oklahoma and Arizona, rallies that have states that have both seen increasing numbers of new cases.
You're telling people to listen to local officials, but in Tulsa you defied local health officials to have an event that, even though you say it didn't result in a spike, dozens of Secret Service agents, dozens of campaign staffers are now quarantined after positive tests. And then in Arizona, one of the hardest hit states, you packed a church with young people who weren't wearing masks.
Well, I want to remind you again that the freedom of speech and the right to peaceably assemble is enshrined in the Constitution of the United States. And even in a health crisis, the American people don't forfeit our constitutional rights.
And tonight, the Associated Press is reporting that a journalist for the Oklahoma Watch, who was in attendance at President Trump's rally in Tulsa last weekend, says that he has tested positive for COVID-19. This afternoon, Dr. Anthony Fauci noted that many of the new infections are among younger Americans and indicated that the White House is looking at a new testing strategy.
The overwhelming majority now of people getting infected are young people, likely the people that you see in the clips and in the paper who are out in crowds. You have an individual responsibility to yourself, but you have a societal responsibility, because if we want to end this outbreak, really end it, and then hopefully when a vaccine comes and puts the nail in the coffin, we've got to realize that we are part of the process. What we're dealing with right now is community spread in the context of a substantial proportion of the people who are getting infected do not know they're infected. They're not symptomatic. They're asymptomatic individuals. What we're going to do, and we are doing, and you're going to be hearing about this, flooding the area of a community to get a feel for what's out there, particularly among the asymptomatics.
Before the task force briefing, Fauci told the Washington Post that the new strategy was something called pool testing, or testing samples of a large group, which would allow for a rapid increase in the number of people tested. That rapid increase in cases in the U.S. is being closely watched in Europe. Tonight, the New York Times reporting that the European Union is ready to ban most travelers from the United States because there is no sign the coronavirus outbreak is under control here. Meanwhile, the president is pledging to prevent more monuments from being torn down. He tweeted earlier tonight this, quote, "I just had the privilege of signing a very strong executive order protecting American monuments, memorials, and statues, and combating recent criminal violence, long prison terms for these lawless acts against our great country." Trump was originally scheduled to spend the weekend at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, but this afternoon canceled the trip. He, quote, "wanted to stay in Washington, D.C. to make sure law and order is enforced." Trump has also renewed his attacks on Obamacare, asking the Supreme Court to overturn it. Today, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi had this reaction to Trump's efforts.
I'm in a mood because this is a matter of life and death. And this administration has failed miserably. 2 days in a row of record numbers of cases. Same one of those days, the president going to overturn access to quality, affordable care.